Hi, I'm Greg Schaffer, and welcome to the virtual CISO moment. Walter Haydock joins us today. He is the founder of StackAware, which helps AI-powered companies measure and manage cybersecurity, privacy, and compliance risk. Walter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Greg, thank you for having me on.
Would love to hear your story, as we usually do. As our first segment here, if you could start with the how and the why you got started in the technology arena. Just kind of bring us through your career and then to how and why you founded StackAware.
So, from my time in the Marine Corps as an intelligence and reconnaissance officer, and then working on Capitol Hill as a staff member for a House committee, I thought I understood dynamic environments and, in some cases, even chaos. But moving into the private sector showed me that there can be an entire new level. And I founded StackAware because I've seen organizations wasting time, money, resources on checkbox exercises to manage their risk that don't really accomplish the mission, and knew that there was a better way to do it. So that's why I decided to start partnering with companies to help them really effectively manage risk in a way that enables the business.
So one of the things I always like to ask folks that came from military background is what's one thing that comes to mind that you brought from the military that has helped you in the civilian and also from the government as well too. I know you mentioned like the chaos and maybe a surprise or a lack of surprise that there's like more chaos maybe in the private sector. I don't know. But what's one thing from the military that you brought that's helped you in the technology and security field?
Decision making is by far the most important skill that I developed in the military. And one thing that I was taught when I was a young officer in training was to make decisions when you have 70% certainty, because if you wait until greater than that degree, then you're going to lose opportunities. And if you make decisions before that point, then you're basically just guessing. So there's a happy medium where you have enough reasonable certainty to move forward, but you're not waiting for a perfect picture.
Yeah, and that's so hard for us in the technology field because we're always like thinking about like things binary. I mean, by nature, that's what we deal with is 0 or 1. It's yes or no. I know for me, when I first I was in networking, and networking is very binary. Either you're connected or you're not. And then starting to migrate into understanding what risk management was about that there is a gray area, and sometimes it's like you have to take into account other things. That the concept of, well, why can't we spend more money to encase a conduit in concrete, um, really stuck with me. We were running a line out to a separate building, and that was our standard back then. But the CFO said, no, we're not going to do that because nobody's ever going to dig in that area of the campus. This is for a university back then. And I think that that's one of the hardest things that those of us who start out in the field tend to try to understand, is that it's not binary. Sometimes you have to take all these inputs and find that balance as far as the proper risk approach to a problem. Is that something that you would agree with, that you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're never going to have a perfect scenario. And I made a joke the other day on LinkedIn that sometimes executives will, when pushed for their risk appetite, say things like, well, we have a lot of tolerance for good things, but not a lot of tolerance for bad things, which isn't incredibly helpful to people who need to make decisions out there on the edge of the organization.
Yeah, and that's one of our goals, is to try to educate folks in the C-suite as far as trying to understand what risk tolerance actually means. And certainly, I know that there are folks in our field that do a good job of that, and some that could do a better job of that. But let me now jump over, talk a little bit about, really interested in StackAware and also talking about AI in general, because I know you're very active on LinkedIn and you share your knowledge, and I want to thank you for that. You share your knowledge in the AI governance space. It's helped me an awful lot in some areas. In fact, I think that it might have been you who first had noted that back a couple of years ago that ISO 42001 was out. And I almost immediately jumped in and bought the standard to try to figure that stuff out. And that was, I think, 2 years ago. So, but talk a little bit about StackAware, because I am intentionally coming into this discussion not knowing exactly what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. I want to hear more.
StackAware helps AI-powered companies measure and manage their risk through implementation of the ISO 42001 standard. So just like any compliance framework, there are a range of possible ways that you can meet the requirements of a given document. What we do is we use ISO 42001 as a way to build an effective, actionable risk management program, as well as providing the benefits of a compliance certification when it comes to building customer trust. And even in the United States, believe it or not, in some jurisdictions, we're already seeing the government recognize ISO 42001 as potentially giving safe harbor from regulatory action under certain circumstances.
So I know that there are other initiatives out there. I believe that 42001 was the first standard that was released in the AI space, but you've got NIST now that has the AI risk management framework, and the European Union has the AI Act. So two questions here. First of all, how do those interact or align with 42001? And second, what is it about 42001 that your company has chosen that framework to standardize on? What is the advantage to that over the other frameworks?
The three primary frameworks that you mentioned: one, the EU AI Act; two, the NIST AI risk management framework; and three, ISO 42001, each represent a category of compliance frameworks in general. So the first one, the EU AI Act, is a binding obligation passed by a government. So there's no choice of whether or not you're going to follow those requirements.
Okay.
The NIST AI risk management framework is a voluntary standard, except for those in the US federal government, but that's a narrow slice. But for most organizations, it's a voluntary standard against which you can benchmark yourself but not achieve certification. ISO 42001, however, is a certifiable framework that you can get an external auditor to grant you a certification for. Happy to talk about how they work together, but just wanted to lay that out.
No, I appreciate the clarification there. And you bring up the audit point, because that was the next question I was actually going to ask. So you can go out and get audited against 42001 and certified just as you can against 27001 in the ISO frameworks taxonomy?
ISO 42001 is a certifiable management system that you can definitely get audited against. StackAware itself has been audited against 42001 and has been certified since 2024.
And so, okay, I guess that's something that I hadn't dug down into the details that far, that was actually offered now by auditors as something that can be audited against. Of course, I guess you can audit against any sort of framework there. So how does, in the ISO taxonomy, how does 42001 dovetail with, integrate with 27001, for example, that we're familiar with more in the security area?
ISO 42001 integrates very well with ISO 27001. It has a very similar structure with some additional wrinkles. The main difference is the subject matter, whereas ISO 27001 is focused on your information security management system. ISO 42001 is focused on your AI management system. There's a lot of overlap, and organizations can definitely operate both together seamlessly through an integrated management system. And I've seen that and done that with some of our customers.
So if you were to have a company that contacted you about wanting to find out how good they're doing AI, let's just start with something very basic there, and you start talking about the AI management system. And a lot of times, sometimes when we talk industry, speak to companies that get a little bit of the deer in the headlight looks, and they say, well, what do you mean by AI management framework or AI management system? How would you answer that to a company?
An AI management system is a series of policies, procedures, and controls through which you manage the use of AI in your organization, including the risks and the impacts of that type of use.
And do you typically see that it's larger organizations that are looking for something like this, or do you see SMB as small mid-sized businesses that are wanting to at least explore, maybe not get certified, but explore down this path?
I've worked with a range of organizations when it comes to size in terms of ISO 42001 implementation. Obviously, on the smaller end, there's StackAware, which
Mhm.
is a very nimble startup, and our scope is quite expansive. It covers our platform, it covers our services, and most of the company. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have companies like Amazon, where they have achieved ISO 42001 certification, but the scope only covers 4 specific products. So it's a very narrow scope for them compared to the hundreds of products that you can buy from Amazon Web Services. So I've seen the full range. The biggest difference is in terms of scope based on company size.
Well, you brought up Amazon, and I know that you had mentioned at some point, I think on LinkedIn, about Amazon and Samsung getting burned by not assessing AI risks properly. Um, what sort of governance issues did you find, or did you see that would have perhaps caused that? And more importantly, and the reason why I think it's important to ask these questions and to dive in, I never like piling on an organization that got dinged, because that just doesn't, it's never a good look. But we can learn from their mistakes and collectively as a society apply those lessons to other businesses. So um, thoughts about that?
With respect to Amazon, they, according to press reporting, were the victims of what I call unintended training in late 2022, early 23. So what happened was, according to this reporting, Amazon engineers were using ChatGPT to process some internal architecture and source code that they were trying to improve. At that time, they had not opted out of ChatGPT's default training mode. So OpenAI was improving their models based on the input from these Amazon engineers. Subsequent to that, other Amazon engineers went in and were using ChatGPT. Again, this is all according to press reporting, to help prepare themselves for interviews of potential candidates. And these
Mhm.
engineers realized or noticed that the responses they were getting from the OpenAI system were so good that it implied they had, or OpenAI had, inside information on Amazon's architecture or method of operation. And according to a Business Insider article, an Amazon attorney then warned everybody within Amazon not to process confidential information using ChatGPT. So that's the essence of the issue, and happy to talk about how they could have potentially avoided that risk to begin with.
Yeah, no, please continue with that. I've got some thoughts about that, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
At a basic level, simply opting out of the default training mode for ChatGPT probably would have saved Amazon a lot of headache here. There would have been some other issues in terms of data retention and the fact that on the consumer version, if you're using the free plan, you don't have a commercial non-disclosure agreement in place. But they could have avoided a lot of the issues that surfaced as a result of this specific incident, where it looks like some of their intellectual property was embedded into then current OpenAI models and future ones.
Well, you have I want to try to be clear about something specifically. I know that there are other products out there, but let's just stick on OpenAI's ChatGPT, because that's the one that I rely upon the most as well. And you're right. There's a within the first paid tier, and I can't remember what it's called, um, the business plan, I think it is, and then there's another one above that, like the enterprise or something along those lines. But anyway, there is an option to opt out of the training. And I have one, maybe two issues with that. The first is that it's embedded. It's a little bit difficult to get to, and it doesn't exactly say what it is that it does. It just says something like turn on to help improve the product. From my perspective, I think that that should be a little bit more prominent, that you want to put that out front to users saying, hey, if you don't want stuff to be trained here, have it on like the login screen or something like that. Is it on by default or is it off by default to your knowledge?
For the business versions of ChatGPT, and specifically ChatGPT Business and ChatGPT Enterprise, training is disabled and cannot
Okay.
be enabled by users.
Okay,
However, for the free Plus and Pro versions, training is enabled by default, but anyone can opt out for his or her own subscription.
Oh, okay. So yeah, the Plus was the one that I was thinking about, where you actually have to go in. That's the one that's something like $30 a month or something like that, I believe. You actually have to go in and turn that off, and it's not inherently obvious that that you need to do that. There's no there's no guidance for that. Any thoughts on how to fix that outside of like making it on by default? Now, and before you answer that, I understand why they want to have it on, because that's how the whole ecosystem works. It's like that's how it learns. But to me, that seems like almost an unacceptable risk in our field. What do you think?
For most businesses, I would say having default training on your content and the model being available to third parties without a need to know, I would say that is an unacceptable risk. And I would certainly advise any of my clients to crack down on any use of ChatGPT when it is training on the content provided to it. As you mentioned, though, there is a strong incentive from the businesses that are operating the system to have as many people submit their content for improvement. If you look at Anthropic, just recently, a couple of weeks ago, they changed their default to mirror OpenAI's approach. Previously, they would not train on content by default, but now they are unless you opt out. So I think they're seeing there's a potential competitive advantage there, and we're going to see these generative AI providers lean into trying to train on user content unless the company has an enterprise agreement or has the individual has opted out.
Well, and in particular, if you get to the free version, a lot of people will say that there's really no such thing as something that's free. In some way, shape, or form, you're paying for it. So if you have the free version of ChatGPT, really you're paying for it with what you input. That's the exchange there. But unfortunately, I don't think, and maybe I'm being a little pessimistic here, but I don't think that the general population understands that. I don't think that they understand that if they put in like a housing contract and say to the free version of ChatGPT and say, hey, just summarize this for me, or give me some help here, or they put in like a diagnosis for an illness and they want it summarized. I don't think that they know right off the top of their head that what they're putting in is that's causing the model to learn and could be regurgitated out at some point in time. There seems to be a big gap there as far as information security and privacy goes, and for the general public. Thoughts on how we might be able to solve that?
There's definitely a trade-off, because if you have something that's a quote free product, there needs to be some incentive for the business offering it to make it available without financial cost. So I definitely understand that perspective. And, I'm a free market capitalist. I run a business. I understand that. I think it's important to equip people to understand what sort of trade-offs they're making when they use these services. So that's something that I try to do as much as I can publicly on social media, things like that, through my blog. And yeah, I think it's going to be, there's always going to be a trade-off. And my recommendation to companies is that they lean toward having people opt in rather than having to opt out when it comes to training. But, these are business decisions, and you're going to see companies do what they think is best from a bottom line perspective based on, what the blowback is and how they think people are going to react.
No, I was just thinking that maybe there could be something that when they install it that they could read through and check, and that says that your information might be used for this, but it's probably in the EULA as it is anyway. And as it's like those things are like, can be pages long, and how many times do people actually read the whole thing there and they click away? This is sort of like the same problem. A lot of times we talk about AI, it's like, well, it's something that's different. Well, it's not really, in the sense that it's the same problem that we have whenever some new technology is introduced. Is we have to learn, and society has to learn the boundaries on how to use it properly. And I think, and I'm kind of just going off on a tangent here. I think that the society has a responsibility to understand that you can't just pick something up and run with it. That you need to teach yourself a little bit. But I do think that all of us in the industry, one way or the other, we have a responsibility to try to educate. We do this now with, like, phishing, for example. When phishing first came out, we didn't really focus too much as an industry on trying to educate the public on that. But now we try to give them some ideas about what to look for as far as security awareness and phishing and business email compromise and all that. I think that probably, maybe, if we can go down that path a little bit more with education, that might help. But do you see perhaps a move towards that in the future of better educating the public on the idea that, hey, your data might end up being used to train, and that other people could see it?
I think AI literacy more broadly is definitely an important public policy initiative, and that could include things like security, privacy, compliance, implications of using certain tools. So I think we've seen some good, at least messaging, come out of the executive branch with their AI action plan, which mentions AI literacy and training for the public at large. And I think that's a good policy initiative that I definitely support.
Is that through CISA or a different branch, different area?
This would be primarily workforce training from my recollection from the AI action plan. So it would be upskilling folks who might be otherwise displaced by technology.
Okay. Well, that makes perfect sense. Well, I don't know about you, Walter, but all this stuff about AI, it's stressful, and trying to understand where the boundaries are. Me personally, it's like I still always freak out whenever I'm using ChatGPT, and I don't think that, like, a couple weeks go by where I don't, like, double check my settings to make sure that something that hasn't happened and that it hasn't, like through some update, defaulted back to I'm going to share, because sometimes that can happen, and I'll update and then something can happen there. So and in general, anything as far as security goes is a very stressful field. And I will add that you mentioned that you're a small business entrepreneur. You founded company, and there's a lot of stress that's just involved in running a company, getting it started and running it and growing it. I emphasize on this podcast that it's so important for people to de-stress, decompress in a healthy manner. And I love asking this question because I love hearing these stories. What's one of the things you do to help decompress from everything that's stress related, both in our field and also being an entrepreneur?
I'm lucky enough to live on a ski mountain in New Hampshire, so I get out on the slopes whenever I can to burn off some of that energy and also teach my daughter how to ski. She's going into her 4th season now, so we are making a lot of progress, and it's really enjoyable to do.
What do you do in the summertime when there's no snow? Do you mountain bike down the slopes?
You can. I don't. Unfortunately, and in my in my advanced years, my body is starting to fail me in certain ways. So certain sports are kind of off limits. My wife is a big hiker, so I can't even keep up with her at this point. But yeah, in summer, I mean, swimming, that's a good thing to do in New England. A lot of nice lakes in the summertime.
Well, the reason why I ask is that I actually have embraced mountain biking at 58 this year. Although
Nice.
I don't know if I am quite at the, I was going to say confidence level, but I'm going to say stupidity level of doing something downhill. I've seen, like, some jumps that people do, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. There's no, it's easy. You can figure out how to do it. You don't understand. It's like I've been around for more than half a century. It's like things are brittle, and I'd like to keep them, like, intact as much as possible. But I do like basic technical riding and all that. So, Well, what do you got planned as far as like future plans go, whether it be for StackAware for yourself or both, or tell me about future plans.
The future of StackAware is to become an AI governance and risk management platform. So we do have a software product that our customers can use today, and some are. And the goal is to take the lessons learned from what we're doing on the services side and turn that into a more automated solution that can be more widely used and provide the benefits of the lessons learned along the way.
Excellent, excellent. And you said that your customer base varies from small businesses to large businesses.
Yeah, we do have a mix of customers. We do have a specialty in healthcare and life sciences. So we've worked with organizations that are using AI to deliver patient care, to help providers be more efficient. And that's where we found the most success so far. So we're going to continue along that path.
So if a company wanted to contact you guys, what's the best way to do it?
The best way to contact us is to go to stackaware.com, and you can book a call directly from that site.
StackAware.com, guys and girls and everybody. If you're interested, give them a shout. Find out how you can better your AI governance. Walter, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. I've learned a lot. Some of it I liked, a little bit of it I didn't, but that's okay. It's like I get scared with all this sort of stuff, but that's the beauty of our field. You know, I've been in this for close to 40 years right now, and like there's nothing different. Year to year, things change, and that's what makes it exciting. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
And everybody, stay secure.